Hi, good morning, Xanthe.
Good morning. How's it going?
It's going well. It is the afternoon for me, and I am in that, that afternoon slump when you're like a
Yes,
little bit tired, but I'm doing well. I'm really excited to talk to you today.
I'm so excited, so grateful to you for hosting and for having me on here today.
It's a pleasure. How are you doing?
I am well. I'm well. It feels like a day where I feel like I have a handle on what's going on, and that's not every day in the business owning life. So today is a good one. Today is a good one.
That sounds great. I'm glad that I caught you today. That's really good. Xanthe, you are one half of O Sierra.
hmm
And I'll leave it up to you to explain to everyone listening who Osiara is, but also who you are and who your business partner Frank is. What's your story like? How did you end up here where you're now? Like not just geographically, but like doing what you do. What did you do before? Give me a little, yeah, run through.
Absolutely, yeah. So, as you mentioned, I am half of Osier Creative. I'm a co-founder and CEO. Osier is a creative and branding agency. So we do anything from brand strategy, brand design, web design, mentorship, and business coaching. I own the business with my partner Frank. So Frank is the other co-founder, and he's my partner in business and in life. We're married, so he's my husband. And we began the business about just over 3 years ago when we were both working in a somewhat marketing managerial capacity for different small businesses locally. And local
Mhm.
to us is back in Canada, which is just outside of Toronto in a town called Hamilton.
Oh
Yeah,
wow.
so we started that business together based on essentially we were working for two other small businesses at the time, and we really recognized the way that working in a small business as a creative, whether you're actually running the business or just in a marketing capacity, can be so challenging and isolating when there's not a team to bounce ideas off of. So in kind of working in the businesses where we were in the community that we were able to make some really amazing connections with other small business owners, and slowly but surely, because we have creative skill and we have kind of that energy where we love to collaborate and we love to have those creative conversations, we started being brought on to do freelance work for some of those businesses that we knew just through the community. And we owe so much of our success to the people that believed in us at the beginning and some of those other local businesses. And once we started taking on a few freelance projects, we started to realize like, wow, we can really make a change here. Like we can make a big difference in people's businesses and people's lives and in our own lives. And we both had big dreams to, travel and have a lot more freedom in our personal life and allow us to kind of live with a little bit more balance. And it just snowballed from there. So only after a couple of months of doing the freelance work together, we realized that we could really have something and make a go of it. And so I ended up quitting my job right away, jumping into OCR full time. And Frank followed only a few months later. So that was, 3 years ago. And so much has changed from then. At first, we were kind of a full service marketing agency taking on any work that came through the door, which I think is really common for a business just getting started. But slowly but
Exactly.
surely, we started to realize that where we offered the most value was really in empowering business owners to understand their brand story, connect with their audience, build community based on that, and build brands and businesses that amplify, the authentic truths that business owners are experiencing. So we've evolved, into a full agency at this point. Now we have, other people on our team that work with us, other designers,
Mm.
operations management, digital management, all those kinds of things now. But still at the core of it is, the vision that Frank and I have had to have a global agency, be working all over the world. And now just this year, we've relocated to Tulum, Mexico for the foreseeable future, where we are establishing ourselves here with a property that we've purchased that we're turning into an Airbnb. So that's going to be another element of the Osira business model, which will be to have properties that we can offer as rentals so that other people can kind of work and play and experience that same work life balance and travel lifestyle that we embrace ourselves.
That sounds amazing. So once you've like transformed this house into an Airbnb and rent it out, are you gonna move on to the next place, to the next country, or like?
Exactly. Yes, we will. We will. So our next plan is California. We've had, which has always been a
Ooh.
big picture plan, is somewhere we really, really want to kind of establish ourselves and situate ourselves. So we'll be looking into that within the next year, once this place is ready to go. And then from there, we would absolutely be continuing to kind of find different hubs and areas where we might be able to establish a rental business and just grow that too. And I mean, all of this lends itself to what we do in the branding world as well, which is just being able to access multiple cultures, multiple regions, areas, and be able to gain inspiration from there, as well as building a team that is, satellite and not all in one place either, so that we can always have those different perspectives and really just provide something super unique to our clients.
Well, it sounds like you're living the dream. Sounds beautiful.
Almost. Getting
Um,
there, getting there.
but I am really curious about the name Osierra. Why? What does that mean?
I'm so glad you asked. So, O Sierra is
I'm
actually the
sure
name
I'm
of.
I'm sure I'm the first one to ask, right?
No, it's so funny. We do get asked, not as often as you would think. A lot of people actually think my name is Sierra, so I always get emails that are like, "Hi,
Okay.
Sierra," but but not the case. So, O Sierra is actually the name of a song, and it's like me and Frank's like
Mm.
our song. So we. Yeah, so it's by a band that was Frank's. He just really loved it when he was growing up as a kid, and the band is
Mm.
from Pittsburgh. And so we've
Mhm.
actually gone to see them play shows there and whatnot. And we were backstage at one of the shows. I don't know what, just over 3 years ago as well. And we were chatting with the lead singer, and we were kind of joking. We weren't married at the time. We are kind of joking, like, "Oh my gosh, you should totally marry us." And he was like, "Actually, I'm ordained." And so the lead singer actually ended up officiating our
No.
wedding. Yeah, yeah. So we eloped to Pittsburgh, just us with my best friend, who now also works with the business. And we did a little backyard ceremony with him, and he played "O Sierra" at the ceremony, on an acoustic guitar. And so obviously the song means a lot to us beyond the name of our business, but for us it sort of signifies the fact that our business and our work and our love and all of those things are always going to be interconnected. So it just felt like the perfect fit.
Oh my goodness, that is so romantic for a business story. How beautiful. I mean, it's also your life,
Exactly.
not just business. Gorgeous. Thank you for sharing.
Of course. Thank you for asking.
And who do you typically work with? Is there a typically, do you have a pattern of businesses that book you? Is it like always creatives, or is it all over the map?
It can be all over the map, truthfully. We work with people who are in different stages of business, sometimes an established business looking to rebrand, sometimes a brand new business, sometimes a
Mhm.
business who doesn't even have a name yet, needs our help with that. And so, in terms of the type of, I wouldn't say that we attract a specific niche, but we definitely attract a specific person. So, business
Mhm.
owners who are ambitious and driven, but in an unconventional way. They want to do things a little bit differently in their industry. They're very, socially conscious, dedicated to being able to build success that helps other people. So, whatever that means. Sometimes it's a product based business, sometimes it's a coach, sometimes it's a creative, sometimes it's something completely different. We've had tech,
Mhm.
we've had beauty, but always that
Mhm.
core value is just wanting to be able to allow their people to feel seen from whatever it is that they offer, and then, feel seen in return. So that's what draws people to us, is that ability to kind of have their vision translated back to them in a way that feels super empowering and that they can really trust is going to build community with the people that they're looking to build community with.
That's so beautiful. And if someone comes to you, is there a specific process you have developed and that you apply, like with helping them figure out their brand, figure out their style, their voice, or is it like different for every person? Is it different for every type of business? How do you? What are the steps you take?
Yeah, such a good question. So, we have a strategy first process. So, that doesn't change no matter what the project is, who the person is. We always begin with strategy. And even if that is something that
Mhm.
we're doing, creative direction on a photo shoot or a web design, brand strategy is always going to be the foundation of everything that we do with our
Mhm.
clients, because we believe that without that foundation, it is impossible to know. know for sure that you're reaching the people that you need to reach in order to find the success that you're looking for. So
Right.
when we say strategy first, that involves us working really in depth with the person to develop their message, develop their brand story. So there is an element of copywriting as well as messaging strategy that's grouped in with that. And then really figuring out how that speaks to an audience. Who is the audience? Where are they hanging
Mm.
out? How can you connect with them? How do you need to speak to them? What tone of voice is going to connect best with them? And then from there, whether we're working on something in more of a visual capacity or more of a consulting capacity, that's when the paths start to change depending on the client and depending on the business. So if we're working on somebody with consulting, for example, we'll still establish that strategy with them, and then we'll move forward into our consulting. And if we're working on brand design, we would establish that strategy, and then we would move on to the visuals and making sure that everything we create from the visual perspective is consistently relating back to that foundation so that we can be sure that they're going to build trust with the community that they're looking to build.
What even is branding? Like, is it because there's, I guess, when people hear the word branding, there's an idea in their head. Oh, branding is, a color scheme and like a logo. But I mean, there is more to branding than that, of course. As you mentioned brand story, which I find really interesting as well. Like, what is a brand story, and how do you dig that up? Like, how do you
Mhm.
unpack a brand story, if you want to like touch on that as well? But what what is the best way to explain branding to someone that thinks, well, it's colors and fonts?
Yeah, absolutely. No, no, it's such a good question, and there's definitely that preconception that branding is a visual art, which it is. Absolutely, there's
Mhm.
visual elements to it, but
Mhm.
ultimately, branding is the way your business interacts with the world, and it can be so many different things.
Oh, I
There's
love
branding
that.
for
That is such a good way to put it. The way that your business interacts with the world.
Mhm,
Gorgeous.
mhm.
I love
Exactly. So and when you think of it from that perspective, it's so vast, and that can be really overwhelming too. So, when we try to
that.
explain that to people, it's not to say, like, your brand could be absolutely anything, like, just thinking outside the box, but it's more just that it is literally the way your brand interacts with the world, and that interaction is actually the important word there. So any touch points that you have with your customers, any touch points that you have with your, stockholders, anybody that is in the community that could potentially interact with your brand, whatever those, methods are, mediums are that they're interacting with you, that's where your brand needs to be
Mm.
established. So when we say a brand
Mm.
story, for example, that's something that, you might put out on your social media, you might put out on your website, you might put out when you're having a podcast like this, like a conversation like this. A brand story can be
Yeah.
very public facing, but at the same time, it's internal as well. So when we establish a brand strategy, which does include that messaging, the story, the audience, all those types of things, it serves to interact with the world around your brand in the way that the customers coming in, potential collaborators, but also internally with anyone that you're bringing in to support you. So if you are hiring employees, for example, having that foundation and being able to say, listen, this is our brand story, that's how they know that when they interact with the public, they're going to be translating that too. So it can be so minute as the way that you welcome someone when they walk through the door. If you have a business that has a physical space,
Mhm.
that's branding. Your business cards that you hand out, of course, that's branding, but not just the business cards themselves, but how you do it. Where are they located? How do people come into contact with them? And thinking about things from an
Mm.
interactive perspective, even if your brand is purely digital. And I think this is something, especially now in this new world that we're living in where everything is online, is that doesn't mean that our brand experience is going to be diluted. It actually means that our brand experience is more important because we don't have the pleasure of person to person contact where we can just explain something to somebody. We need to
Right.
rely on the visual and the touch points and the journeys that happen throughout the online space to tell our brand story for us. And branding can be, like I mentioned, so many different things. But if you really think about experience, interaction, and really think about audience, how are they going to interact with you? What are they going to understand of you? Like, what is their perception of you? Those are the brand elements that are super, super foundational and that arguably matter more than the visual decisions. But the visual decisions should be made based on those things.
And especially, as you said, I guess in a digital space, those details are much more, the more detail you can give, the better, right?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. More detail and consistency. So branding again is something that should be remembered by your people. So the concept
Mhm.
of colors, fonts, those kinds of things, yes, those are being created because we know that there's something that's going to resonate with your audience. But they are, it's even more important that they're repeated consistently throughout your social, throughout your online, throughout your print marketing, even in the clothes you wear if you are going to be like public facing in that sense. Kind of reiterating those colors builds trust. And so
Mhm.
it's really about the consistency by
Yeah.
which we are putting our brand out in the world. Um, you know, that is going to be the make or break in terms of whether you have that brand recognizability.
You just said that consistency builds trust. Like people know, what to expect, and they know what you're about. And that just made me think of, what about change? Because I've been a photographer for 11 years now, and I've gone through a lot of changes, and personally, like growing up, and so obviously also lots of branding changes and like
Hmm.
direction changes within photography. If you make a change, if you get to that next stage personally and then in your business, and you make, that branding change, and your voice changes, because you have changed, does that break the trust with your clients?
I'm so happy that you asked this question. So this is actually really, really fascinating. No, it's so good because it's something that we see a lot with people who are grappling with the idea of investing in their brand. And they're like, I want to invest in my branding, but I don't know if I'm ready because I don't know if I can commit to one
Mm,
visual or one
mm,
story, right? So that
mhm.
fear of commitment is something that actually does hold people back often from taking the leap to investing in their branding. And it's something that we're really working to unpack with people because brands are absolutely 100% fluid. They should shift and evolve with you. And
Okay.
it can be very hard to navigate that when you are not a branding professional, when you are not a creative professional, or just not in the graphic design space, and you're like, okay, I know that I'm ready for a change, but I don't know where to begin in implementing it. So what people often will do is just scrap everything, start fresh, and
Mhm.
that is where the lack of trust can begin. So if
Okay.
we want to talk about change and shifts and kind of working through that evolution of a brand, it needs to be a fluid progression and it needs to come from a place of understanding. So when I say understanding, I mean understanding the core values that drive the brand. So, although
Mhm.
perhaps your visuals will change, although perhaps your elements of your story will change, is your foundation changing really? And sometimes the answer is yes. If you're coming up with a completely new business plan, sometimes the answer is yes, but a lot of times the answer is no. A lot of times the drivers, your why, the reason why you got into the business,
Yep.
the means by which you want to help and help your audience succeed or solve their problems, those things are foundational. Those things are kind of what make you you and what make you interested in what it is that you're doing and offering. So if those things remain the same and it's only the visuals that are changing, think of that as like the tip of the iceberg. Those are just the things that people see that are changing, but the foundation that drives them is not changing. So how to navigate
Mhm.
that when it actually comes to putting those things out in the world is ultimately having a relationship with a creative or creative agency that you are aware, or you can kind of like develop that relationship from the start, that like, I'm going to be doing this brand work with you, we're going to work together on creating this full, big picture branding, and then let's have touch points every 4 months, every, once a year, to make sure that you still feel like the visuals are translating with your people, that they're still making an impact in the way that you want them to be. They're still being received in the way that you want them to be. And if they're not, that way we can look underneath the iceberg, and start looking at the foundation and, okay, what elements of this is changing and why then should the visuals change to reflect that? So sometimes a good example of that would be, like you mentioned, you're growing up, and so your audience might be growing up as well. So we
Mhm.
can think about this from like the perspective of like a celebrity, and this is so random, but like I often think to myself like the Taylor Swifts and the Miley Cyruses who came up in celebrity at a young age, and their audience was very young,
Yep.
but their audience is growing up with them, right? And so when you think about those people as a brand and you want to kind of reevaluate, okay, how can we make sure that the image stays, or that trust maintains being built and we can continue to connect with our audience who's been with us forever, is you want to look back at the foundation and thinking about the brand story and the why and the people that have been driving that brand, and recognizing, okay, they're getting older. They care about new things now. There are different ways that we can reach them through visuals,
Yeah.
and making that assessment and making that change slowly and making it from a place of understanding of the why, understanding of the process, and also transparency. So when you're looking at rebranding, if you have an existing and established brand, being transparent about the process is a really great way to build trust, because then it's not like your people just wake up one day and everything's new and they don't understand why. You can
Yeah.
actually let them in to say, look, I'm feeling like I'm growing up. I'm feeling like you are connecting with different things now as my audience, and I want to make sure I'm delivering on that. So here's a peek behind the curtains as we kind of excavate and renovate the brand and come up with something that's going to be stronger and more powerful for all of us to move forward with, right?
That is so good because that is such a good point, like, yeah, what about change, and like how do you transition people with you into like the next stage, but also I guess being okay with people leaving, because that's also I guess part of
Hmm.
the process, right? Like you will just sometimes even have a new audience and a new like or a new ideal client, because of that change, and I guess being okay with that as well. But I was just
Hmm.
wondering, but you answered that for me. I was like thinking, what if someone doesn't work with an agency, because they can't afford it, for example, and they have to go through that transition by themselves? um, can they do what they would do with the agency on a like not a smaller scale, but like on their own, revising that, and also using that transparency with the audience, which I think was a great point, as well, to just say it, to just say, this is what's going to happen.
Exactly, exactly. And I love that you brought that up too, because absolutely not everyone is in the position to have an ongoing relationship with a creative. But I
Yeah.
think that truthfully understanding the foundations of brand strategy and understanding what your message is, understanding who your audience is, once
Yeah.
you know those things, it's a lot easier to start making tweaks to them and making changes to them, and then developing a new kind of path for your business in
Mm,
response to that. So if you know, like you've, developed an audience avatar who worked really well for you for 3 years, and now you're like, nah, this isn't working anymore. I got to make a new one. Once you've already kind of understood that process and you know how to develop that kind of character that you're speaking to, making
yeah.
another one is not so complex. And then you can think about, okay, this person who I've now created, this audience avatar, this is like a personality that we kind of create so that you can speak directly to somebody in your branding. Where are they hanging out? What kind of stuff do they like? What are they interested in? What kind of conversations are they having? What are they engaging with? What other brands, in the same space are they responding to, or in different spaces are they responding to? So those are some questions you can ask yourself internally as you go through that process if you're working on it alone, for sure.
Mm. As a brand specialist that you are, expert, would you say it's true that your ideal customer is like you, like yourself? Because there's also that, there's two, I feel like there's two types of narratives, or maybe you can bring them together for me, because sometimes I find them like they're opposites. There's the type
Mm,
of narrative that says, well, you have to ask your client, you have to see what their problem is, how you can solve that, what you can offer. And for example, there's also, I don't know, influencers or whatever who ask people online, what content do you want to see? And then there's the narrative of, well, you just do what you want to do, what you love, and then you'll just attract the right clients with that. And you don't have to ask people, what do you want to see, or what do you need, or what's your problem, how can I help you, basically. What can you bring those together, or are we talking about two, am I talking about two completely different businesses here? Like, what's the
No, I love that. I love what you're saying, because absolutely that's something that people do struggle with a lot in developing their audience, because a lot of us like to believe that our ideal customer is us because it's really easy to relate to somebody that's exactly like you, right?
yeah.
And
Right.
it, right? And in a way it's an easy route, and also it feels natural because a lot of us do create businesses and products that serve a problem that we've personally experienced, right?
Yeah.
So in that sense, if you can really like empathize with the person because you've been in their shoes and you have a personal experience and a personal story to bring to the table, then finding an audience, or sorry, developing an audience that is very similar to you or has experienced things very similar to you is going to be helpful because you can access those feelings really readily because you've already experienced those things.
Right.
That said, most of the time, it's not the case. Most of the time, the people that we're trying to reach are not just like us. They're in different positions in their life. Even maybe they were like us, maybe they're, how we were 10 years ago or something. Like maybe there are commonalities, but they're not living the exact same life. And it's not realistic to be creating businesses for people who are just like us because then there's no diversity, there's no thought towards
Mhm.
culture. And
Mhm.
it just
Mhm.
creates a very, I don't know, a very boring landscape for marketing, right? So
Mhm.
when we think about that avatar and we want to find those commonalities because it is much easier to relate to somebody who we understand, so getting to know that person is really, really important, first and foremost. But if you are the type who is like, I'm building a business, I love I'm loving what I'm doing. I'm just gonna put it out there, and I know I'm gonna attract people I love. First of all, that's real. That's a real thing. If you believe in what you are doing, you will attract people who also believe in what you are doing because that is a genuine connection. That's awesome. But you still have to relate to the people on a different level, on more of a lifestyle level, and less of a like, I'm providing a service that they're going to be excited about level. And in
Mhm.
doing that, where you can sort of bridge the two. So, where you can find this commonality. So, for example, if you are creating a business that you love, but your ideal customer is actually nothing like you, where you can find the commonality is looking at values. So, what do you value and believe in? What do they value and believe in? Because those are things that are intangibles that don't, they're not affected by barriers of, location or job or lifestyle. You can believe and value things without having to be adhering to any kind of like specific day to day. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
they're more like those are
Mhm.
just things that are ingrained and things that just sort of exist within you because of the things that you've experienced. And so
Mhm.
that's something that we really love to do because the way that you can create an impactful product and create an impactful brand messaging is finding the place where those things intersect. Because as a business owner, it's not fun to try and promote something that you don't feel aligns with your values, and it's not fun to try and promote something to somebody who you totally don't understand. And as a consumer, you're more likely to buy from people who remind you of yourself, right? So in
Yeah.
looking at so from that like perspective, right? It's like, I look for things that I want to know that whoever I'm purchasing from or whoever I'm engaging with understands me and is creating for me. And in doing that is finding the places where they do intersect, even if seemingly from the outside they're very different. And that's where the research and the analysis and really developing this like audience persona and figuring out what it is they believe in, what it is they value, even on the surface if it's not obvious, and making that very known to the business owner who's working with us so that they can start to really get to know that person and understand them on a level that is much more deep and much more internal.
Yeah. So the key, like for that connection, is actually connecting on values, not on I like pizza, you like pizza, we like the same things, or we live in the same place, or we have the same job.
Exactly. That's exactly right. That's a really good way to put it. Yeah.
I love that because growing up in the photography industry in the last 10 years, it was a lot obviously about find common ground with your clients, but oftentimes it was meant to mean just like hobbies and superficial stuff, which fair enough, that can work, and it can help, but actually, as you said, it kind of keeps it all very samey if you just
hmm
look at that kind of thing. So I love that. Thank you. And also, how much of that, like, does that mean then, how much of your own personality do you bring into the brand, to create that kind of connection? Because
hmm
the more important, the superior connection is made with common values, how much do you actually need to bring in, hey, this is me, like, into your brand? Does that depend on the business, on the product, or would you say there's a rule of thumb for that?
Yeah, no, it's a really, really interesting conversation because we see a lot now that people becoming the face of their brands, or even just people who, like you
Right.
mentioned, in the influencer space, who we know them as people and then they become brands. And
Mhm.
ultimately, it definitely does vary a business to business. I don't think there's any rule of thumb when it comes to whether you need to put your face at the forefront or not. But
Yeah.
our belief is that somebody's story, somebody's personality has to be at the forefront of the brand because people connect with people. And so
Mhm.
that doesn't necessarily mean that the founder needs to be the face. It doesn't even mean that necessarily mean that, somebody within the company needs to be the face. It just means that there needs to be some level of humanity being brought into the brand in order for you to attract customers who are obviously humans and
Mm.
who relate to other humans. So
Mhm.
there's so many ways that you can go about doing this. And this can be through, um, creating different ways to bring in the customer into the brand. So whether that means like featuring clients, featuring customers, or
Right.
featuring your own experiences with them, those are some ways to
Mhm.
do it. But there's so many other nuances to get into when it comes to that stuff. But really understanding, I think ultimately it's not necessarily that. I'll just rephrase, because it's not necessarily that one specific person needs to be a part of the brand. It's more that the brand needs to have a personality. And it's not that that personality has to be based off of you as the founder, but it needs to be based
Mhm.
off of the personality that your audience is going to connect with. So,
Mhm.
if you are a founder who is quiet and introverted, but you are looking to seek a very social butterfly, extrovert, bubbly brand, or avatar or customer, then you are going to gravitate towards a brand voice and brand visuals that have a little bit more of that punch, a little bit more of that, boldness, and that will attract your ideal customer. So you're still
Mhm.
giving a personality to the brand. You're still making it feel like it has that sort of, three-dimensional element to it so that people can really relate to it strongly, but you can take your personality kind of out of the equation if you want to, and if you feel like that suits the brand best, or if your brand professional feels that that suits the brand best. But on the
Yeah.
other side, if you are willing to put your face forward in the brand and it makes sense and is relevant to your customers, that is a very powerful thing. So it's something that we definitely love to embrace. We love to encourage people to embrace, and we love to do, to work one on one with people to build that confidence so that they can step out and become the face of their brand. Because there's something that's so beautiful about, as a consumer, really knowing the person that you're supporting with your investments, with your support. Is really, really powerful. So if you have the opportunity to do that and it does make sense, then I feel like there's so much power in it. But if that's not your thing, there's so many ways to create that brand recognition without ever having to put your face at the forefront.
Mm. Would you say not putting your face in the front and maybe even creating that brand voice that is opposite of who you are? Like you just mentioned, someone that's more introverted, but they, put on a brand voice and brand persona that is more extroverted. Would you recommend that more to businesses that are not, face to face? Because I guess like if it's like, for example, a photographer, and they would do that, meeting the photographer in person would be quite the shock, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And yeah, I love that you mentioned that too, because it comes back to that trust component as well, right? And so if your clients are, like you mentioned, regularly meeting you, or they are going to have to work with you in an intimate, vulnerable way, then really it's important to put yourself out there. So even if that doesn't mean, I think when we think about, the kind of person versus personality of branding, a brand personality is often developed for a brand that has a large team or is product based and isn't really related to that personal experience.
Right. Yes.
Whereas
Yes.
bringing in the personality of the person running the business is very important when there is that personal connection. So I'm glad that you mentioned that too, because even from, our perspective, and same goes for a lot of people right now in this digital era. We work with clients from start to finish, and we never meet them in real life. So how do you build that relationship, and that then those relationships that then fuel community growth, they fuel referrals, they fuel positive testimonials. You need to have that personal connection, and a lot of people are not necessarily going to feel comfortable to dive into a relationship that is so, intimate, comes with an investment, comes with a lot of vulnerability, even, for the business, for the person as well, without knowing what our personality is even like to begin with, right? So it's always a really good sign when you meet somebody for the first time and they're like, I feel like I already know you because of what you've been putting out there for your brand, right? So that's like big A plus if you've ever gotten a comment like that.
I have, yes. And I'm actually,
Love
it
it.
is, I have to say, it is something I am proud of, that whenever people meet me in real life and they've been following me online, they always say, "Oh, you're exactly what I thought you would be." So it is kind of reassuring that my voice online is the same as when people meet me, because it's weird when it isn't. Yeah, for a face to face interaction, of course, like
Mhm,
that's
mhm.
so important.
Absolutely, yeah.
One thing I am really interested in, because I mean, I personally go through this all the time, especially now, but also is something I believe that many, many creatives struggle with, is showing up online.
Mhm.
Showing up, as the brand, when you are kind of the brand as well, when it's kind of, a bit of a blended situation, when you are creating something, but you feel like it's been done because everything has already been done, of course. Like, you feel it's been done, a lot of people are doing it, and they're doing it better than you. That's at least the perception. How do you get over that and show up? How do you have that confidence in your brand and in your voice?
Yeah, yeah, and you know what? It's hard. The imposter syndrome is so real, and everybody, no matter what level you're at, experiences those things and those thoughts and those feelings, and the world is a saturated market, and ultimately, what it comes down to is the only thing that makes you different is who you are, because it's truly the only thing that you can bring to the table that nobody else can. And maybe that sounds cheesy, but it's ultimately true. And in order to shake off those feelings of, oh my gosh, I'm not doing enough. Oh my gosh, I'm not doing as much as they are. All of those things that make you feel small is to drop the phone, stop scrolling, first and foremost, stop looking at what everyone else is doing, because that's definitely not going to help, and just shake it out and have a little brainstorming session with yourself. And this is actually a tool that we use all the time when we start getting in that spiral of like looking at what other people are doing, feeling like we're not keeping up. And feeling uninspired, because that's one of the things that comes from that. When you're constantly comparing, it's impossible to have original thoughts because you're consumed by how unoriginal your thoughts are, right?
Right, that's
And
so
so,
true. Yeah. Wow.
yeah, exactly, exactly. So, taking space, one of my absolute favorite practices is to just kind of close down the computer, put my phone down, sit or stand or go for a walk. And me and Frank, my partner, will just go on like a full rant about all the things that we're feeling when it comes to what makes us different, why we do what we do. And it's literally just like a little like hype up session of like, this is our thing. This is what we're not doing. This is what we are doing. This is who we really like. This is what we want to serve. This is what we want to do for people. We get
Yeah.
super like energized and amped up about it, and then we just like make a bunch of notes in our phone about it, and maybe we revisit them and we use them for content, but maybe not. Maybe it's just something that we do just to help us feel good. It depends on the day, but ultimately really thinking about um, who you want to be in the space and who you are in the space. So I think we think about, oh, I want to be like this, I want to be like that person, I love what they're doing, blah blah blah, but it's like none of that matters because you are who you are, and that's not going to change. So how can you take that and harness it to be positive and harness it to be what people care about? And I mean, even thinking about it from like a personality perspective and like, what makes you a great friend? What makes you a great conversationalist? What makes you, a good person to invite to a dinner party? Like these are things that seemingly have nothing to do with the business, but are relevant because they're the same reason why your audience is going to connect with you, right? They're all just these little nuanced personalities. And the more of that you can weave into what you do, rather than saying like, actually, I have a great example too. I was writing a blog post a couple of weeks ago, and it was a blog post that was like a list, like, those little listicles that would like all the like systems we use in our business, whatever. And
Mm,
I had been looking at, some ideas on like what builds like good SEO. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to write this blog post. It's supposed to be really good for SEO. Whenever I'm writing it. And I'm like, after writing, I was like, "This is so boring. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I don't know why. I don't care about this. Like, I just don't care about this." And that's such a good indicator that you're in the wrong space when you actually just literally don't care. So I
Mm,
put it down, and I felt super guilty too because it was like our Mondays, like when we write our blog post, and it was like the end of the day, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I just spent all day writing this post, and now it's like not even gonna go up because I think it's so lame." And then me and Frank just like sat around the kitchen table and just started talking about. I'm like, "Okay, well, what do I care about? Like, what do I really care about in this business? Like, what do I really want to tell people?" And
mm.
I ended up coming up with a really amazing post, great email content. It was like really insightful, and it was like really genuine. And it wasn't what everyone else is doing. And I'm sure it's not going to get me super great SEO. Maybe you never find that conversation on Google, but needless to say, the people who it reached could tell how important it was to me.
Yeah.
And the people who agree and whom that is also important to are the people who are going to stick around and keep growing our community. And truthfully, those are the only people that we really care about reaching in this space, right? So, little story for you.
Man, that was beautiful. Perfect wrap up of our session. Thank you so much. That
Good.
was really, really also what I just learned this week, recording another conversation about SEO, was that actually, even if you think like the content of your blog post wasn't good for SEO, I don't know, but if a lot of people share it, it's still gonna help for SEO. So
Exactly.
I guess it does matter that you care about the content, and then other people who care will share it as well. So that's great.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, so true. So, so true. We have a little saying that we always say that, with, the SEO and the Instagram algorithm and all these things, it's like we act like like technology is like out to get us and it's not putting us out there in the way that we want. But ultimately, like just create content that people care about, create
Yeah,
content you care about,
yeah.
and that's really the beginning of success, 100%. 100%. And brand foundations help you to really understand what those things are, but you have to have the drive and the passion to put it out there. Totally.
Love that. Thank you so much, Santi. I'm so appreciative. This was so valuable. I love how much I'm learning this week by talking to so many people. So thank you so, so much for sharing all of that with us.
Thank you. It was such a pleasure. It's so great to chat, and you had some amazing insights as well. So I think this is going to be an awesome conversation.
Yes, it definitely was. Thank you a lot. I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day. It's still early for you, isn't it? So you can.
It's like noon almost. Yeah.
Oh, good. Well, then, happy
Yeah.
lunch. Enjoy.
Thank you. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your evening as well.
I will. Thank you.